In the Ottoman Empire, it was believed that it was better for the Sultan not to look at his own penis during sex, because a child conceived at this moment could be born hunchbacked. It is not known whether Suleiman the Magnificent followed this rule, but Roxolana's youngest son, Sahangar, did have a hump. In the new issue, we will talk about sex in the Sultan's harem. You will learn why sultans were not advised to look at their own penis during this affair, what a chain of lovers is, and how explicit reading initially cured the sultan, but ultimately pushed him to the sad end of his life. To begin with, let's count how many women the Turkish sultans had. By law, the Ottomans could have 4 wives and an unlimited number of concubines. The harem was an indicator of the ruler's status, his wealth, and male power. European ambassadors, after returning from Istanbul, talked about the huge sultan's harems. According to them, Suleiman the Magnificent had over 300 concubines. His son by Bayram Sultan, that is Roxolana, Selim II, and grandson Murat III allegedly had even more women. But the ambassadors clearly exaggerated here. There were 167 women in the harem of Suleiman the Magnificent, 73 in Selim II, and about 150 in Murat II. The harems of the sultans consisted of Christian and Jewish women who entered there at the age of 12 to 15. The Quran forbade taking Muslim women captive and keeping them as concubines. So the servants of the sultans were Ukrainians, Greeks, Albanians, Bosnians, Georgians, and Circassians. The most beautiful slaves were given to the ruler by officials and Crimean khans who wanted to please. To get into the sultan's harem, the girls had to go through a strict casting. An important stage was the virginity test, which was carried out by the midwives from the harem. They also had to make sure that the slaves' genitals were not too wide. It was believed that the man would get less pleasure from it. Girls with too large breasts were also not taken, because everything in the female body had to be in harmony. After the first stage of selection, lice were planted on the bodies of the best girls. Ottoman midwives believed that they did not take root in patients with leprosy, plague, and cholera. To check their mental health, the slaves were monitored at night. If they snored, talked in their sleep, goodbye. After that, to a 2-year training. They had to know the Arabic and Ottoman languages, confidently read the Quran, dance seductively, understand poetry, play musical instruments. A rich curriculum. And all these efforts were not in vain. All the girls in the harem were paid. Even low-ranking concubines received 6 aki per day. By modern calculations, this is about $18. From time to time, the sultan would arrange a house party in the harem. The girl who liked the ruler received a silk scarf from him. This was a sign. At night, she would lose her virginity. Before an intimate meeting, the chosen one was taken to the bathhouse. All hair from the body was removed with wax, and the skin and hair were smeared with perfumes. Then there were songs and dances. The slave was led along the golden path, a corridor that connected the harem with the sultan's personal chambers. A magnificently dressed and perfumed girl entered the room alone and had to walk from the door to the bed. As a sign of greeting, she kissed the sultan's foot. If a slave became pregnant, she was immediately moved to the old palace, where she received money for the maintenance of maids and prepared for childbirth. Having given birth to a boy, she no longer had the right to intimate relations with the sultan. She was engaged in raising her son and could only hope for his accession to the Ottoman throne. The rulers of the Ottoman dynasty were quite knowledgeable in matters of love. They even had their own Ottoman Kama Sutra. Sexual issues in the Islamic world were devoted to a special genre of treatises, Bahname. The first of them were written in the 9th century. The authors took the best from ancient physicians and supplemented it with their own knowledge. This literature came to the Ottomans in the first half of the 15th century. In total, more than 50 Ottoman Bahnames are known, mostly translated. The most popular Ottoman treatise of the same type is The Return of the Old Man to Youth by the Power of Sex, which the scientist and physician Kemal Pasha Zaid translated from Arabic. In real life, The Return of the Old Man consists of 9 stories. Their titles resemble the titles of modern adult videos: A Passionate Girl and Her Negro Lover, The Eunuch's Wife and the Mule Driver, The Widow Who Made Love to a Blind Man, For example, the last one is about a respectable lady from Baghdad. She comes to the grave of her late husband. There she sees a blind man reading prayers for his repose. He is asleep and has an erection. The widow cannot resist and makes love to a blind stranger. But for good sex, you need a suitable partner, and literature also helped the great Ottomans in this. The illustrated treatise, The Natural Impulse in the Desires of Sexual Intercourse, from the 17th century, contains a detailed classification of female genitalia. The author Mustafa ibn al-Faiz distinguishes 8 types of luxuries: raw, dense, delicate, oily, dry, wide, deep, empty. If the Sultan is not into women, the Bahname will also teach him how to have sex with men. For example, the plot The Chain of Lovers is a short story about how, after a meal and an interesting conversation, cheerful young men arrange an orgy. In this work, the author gives advice on how men can seduce boys, how to make love to hermaphrodites. By the way, this is one of the favorite stories of Sultan Selim, the terrible Suleiman's father, who ruled at the beginning of the 16th century. Selim's intimate life is still controversial among researchers. There is an opinion that the Sultan preferred to spend time in the company of young warriors. Selim's wife, the mother of the future Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, wrote her husband letters full of despair. She complained of loneliness, vainly hoping to meet Selim, but he was always lost at work. However, in 8 years in power, Selim almost doubled the territory of the empire. Maybe they really developed military plans there. And now about the healing properties of literature for adults. The Bahname is credited with healing Sultan Ibrahim I, nicknamed the Mad, who ruled in the middle of the 17th century from impotence. Ibrahim spent his entire childhood and youth in a castle on the orders of his older brother Murad IV. Sitting in prison, he expected death every day, but he was lucky. Murad died first, and Ibrahim became the Sultan. It is known that due to the stress experienced, Ibrahim lost his mind and erection. The healer Jinji Haja undertook to help the Sultan. He gave Ibrahim a copy of the Bahname with illustrations, which the Sultan carefully examined every day, and suddenly it helped. Ibrahim was insatiable. He made love with one, then another. At the same time, Ibrahim loved the lush ones. Once, while riding a horse, Ibrahim the first saw a heifer. He was so impressed by the size of her genitals that he ordered them to be cast from gold and sent to different corners of the Ottoman Empire with a demand to find him a woman with a large vagina. And soon Mehmet Pasha gave Ibrahim the first a 150-kilogram Armenian woman, Maryam, who became his mistress named Shevadiyar. In addition to everything, the Sultan also married a Georgian concubine and gave her the treasury of Egypt. During this period of his life, he developed a fetish for things, with which he hung his chambers, because he believed that this way he could increase potency. It all ended badly. A few years later, Ibrahim completely abandoned state affairs, and then was executed.